In this video, we are looking at section 9.2, solving quadratic equations by graphing, day 2. In this example, we're finding the zeros of the function, and we can see here that we have a graph of the function that represents f of x equals x minus 1 times a quantity of x squared minus x minus 6. And we're supposed to find the zeros of the function. Remember, another way to say zeros is roots or the x-intercepts for the function. So we can look here at the graph and we can see that we have an x-intercept here, we have an x-intercept here, and we have an x-intercept here. So there are 3 roots here, and we can identify those as x equals, looks like this is x equals negative 2. We also have x equals 1 and x equals 3. Now we just pulled these straight off of the graph. So these are the zeros for the function, but we also need to confirm that these values will make this function go to 0. So we'll evaluate and make f of x be 0. So let's plug in, let's start with x equals negative 2, and we're going to plug in each of these, and I want you to do that in your notes. Plug in each of these values into this function to make sure that when you evaluate this, you end up with a 0. So we're going to look at f of negative 2. So wherever we have an x, we're plugging in a negative 2. So we have negative 2 minus 1, and then we have a negative 2 squared, and then we're subtracting a negative 2, and then we're subtracting 6. So as we simplify this first quantity here becomes negative 3. Inside this parentheses, we have a negative 2 squared, which is 4. A negative and a negative is a positive, so we end up with a positive 2, and then we're subtracting 6. Continuing to simplify, we have a negative 3 times 4 plus 2. So 4 plus 2 is 6, minus 6 turns into 0. So we can see f of negative 2 becomes 0. So sure enough, that's a 0 for the function. We've confirmed that. So we should also do that for x equals 1 and x equals 3. So go ahead and pause the video and work those out in your notes and make sure that you get f of 1 equals 0 and f of 3 also equals 0. An alternative way to look at that same problem that we just looked at, finding the zeros of the function, here's our f of x equals x minus 1 times the quantity of x squared minus x minus 6, is we can use zero product property. So our first quantity, x minus 1, we're going to leave that alone, and then we're going to look to see how can we factor x squared minus x minus 6. Well, let's think. The leading coefficient is 1. We know the signs are going to be different, and the factors of 6, when added together, we end up with a negative 1. So this is going to have to be a negative 3 and a positive 2. And so when we set this equal to 0, we use our zero product property. So we know 0 is equal to x minus 1. That's one piece. We know 0 is equal to x minus 3. And then 0 is equal to x plus 2. So then we're just going to solve each of these individually. So add 1 to both sides. So we get 1 equals x, or x equals 1. We add 3 to both sides. So 3 is equal to x. And over here we get a negative 2 equals x. So we end up with the same solutions. X equals negative 2, 1, and 3, which are the zeros for the function.